Colonel Vaxithor stood at the edge of the training arena, his forearms crossed in a gesture that every cadet recognized as disapproval. His scales rippled with the distinctive purple hue of skepticism as he watched the human girl step onto the combat floor. Freya was small by galactic standards. At 5'6", she barely reached the chest plate of the average Krathri warrior. Her frame looked fragile compared to the muscled bulk of the other recruits, her skin lacking the armored hide or reinforced exoskeleton that protected most species in the Galactic Defense Force. This is what Earth sends us. Vaxithor's voice carried across the arena, drawing snickers from the assembled cadets. A creature that breaks from a simple fall, whose bones shatter under pressure, whose skin tears like wet parchment. Freya said nothing. She simply rolled her shoulders and stepped into the designated combat circle, her expression neutral. "You are weak," Vaxithor continued, his tail lashing behind him. "Your species is weak. You have no natural weapons, no armor, no venom. You are prey animals playing at being warriors." The colonel gestured with one of his upper arms toward a towering figure at the front of the cadet formation. "Throkon, my apex student, undefeated in 273 combat trials. Demonstrate to this human what real strength looks like." Throkon stepped forward, and several cadets instinctively moved back. The Korthan warrior stood nearly 8 feet tall, his body a mass of corded muscle beneath thick, stone-like skin. His species had evolved on a high-gravity world where everything, including the plants, actively tried to kill you. His four eyes gleamed with predatory confidence as he entered the circle. Freya tilted her head, studying him the way a mechanic might study an engine. "Standard combat protocols," Vaxithor announced. "First to yield or achieve incapacitation wins. Begin when ready." Throkon didn't wait. He charged immediately, the ground shaking under his footfalls. His massive fists raised to deliver a crushing blow that had ended dozens of fights. Before they'd truly begun, Freya moved out. It wasn't a dodge, not exactly. It was something more efficient, more calculated. She shifted her weight, redirected her momentum, and suddenly she wasn't where Throkon expected her to be. His fist met empty air where her head had been a microsecond before. His second punch came faster. Adjusted for her movement, Freya stepped inside his guard instead of away from it, a move that defied the survival instincts of every sane being. She was too close now for him to generate full power, and her elbow snapped upward into the nerve cluster beneath his lower jaw. Throkon grunted but didn't fall. His species didn't have the same vulnerable nervous system as humans. He brought his arm down in a hammer blow that should have crushed her into the floor. Should have. Freya had already moved again, and his fist cracked against the reinforced arena floor hard enough to leave a dent. Before he could recover, she was behind him, her leg sweeping low. Not to trip him, he was too massive and too stable for that, but to force him to shift his weight awkwardly. The watching cadets leaned forward. This wasn't how fights usually went. Throkon was slower to react than normal, struggling to track her movements. Freya struck again, her knuckles finding the weak point where his ribs met his hip, then his knee, then the nerve bundle in his shoulder. Each strike was precise, targeted, designed not to overpower but to dismantle. "What is she doing?" one cadet whispered. "Hunting," another replied, his voice filled with unease. Throkon roared and spun, finally landing a grazing blow across Freya's shoulder that sent her stumbling. For a moment, it seemed the fight would turn. The human was wounded, surely, from a strike that could dent armor plating. But Freya barely broke stride. She absorbed the impact, used the momentum to spin herself around, and drove her heel into the back of Throkon's knee with surgical precision. The giant warrior buckled, not fell, but buckled, dropping to one knee. Before he could rise, Freya was on him. Her arm snaked around his thick neck, not to choke. His species could survive for hours without air, but to wrench his head at an angle that compressed the nerves running down his spine. Her legs wrapped around his torso, locking in with a grip that spoke of leverage and mechanical advantage rather than raw strength. Throkon tried to stand, to throw her off. His muscles strained, his entire body shaking with effort. But Freya adjusted her position with each movement, always maintaining optimal leverage, always staying just out of reach of his desperate grasps. "Impossible," Vaxithor breathed. his scales shifting to white, the color of shock. 10 seconds passed. 20. Throkon's movements became sluggish, his body responding more slowly to his mind's commands. The pressure on his neural pathways was disrupting his motor control. 30 seconds. Throkon hit the ground face first, Freya still attached to his back like a relentless parasite. She maintained the hold for 5 more seconds, then released him and stood, barely breathing hard. Silence filled the arena. Freya walked calmly to where Colonel Vaxithor stood, his forearms now hanging loosely at his sides. She stopped precisely 1 meter away, close enough to speak privately, far enough to maintain military protocol. "Permission to speak freely, sir?" Vaxithor managed a stiff nod. "You're right," Freya said quietly. "We're weak. We break easily. We have no claws, no armor, no venom." She paused, glancing back at where medics were helping Throkon to his feet. "But we're from a death world, Colonel. Everything on Earth tried to kill us, and we had nothing but our brains to survive with. So we learned to think, to adapt, to find weaknesses in things stronger than us." She met his eyes with her too. "We learned to hunt." Vaxithor was quiet for a long moment. Then his scales shifted to deep blue, the color of respect. "Cadet Freya," he said formally, his voice carrying across the silent arena. "I believe I owe you an apology. And perhaps the rest of us owe your species a more thorough evaluation." Freya allowed herself the smallest smile. "Just don't call us weak again, sir. We might take it personally." Behind her, Freddy, another human recruit who'd been watching from the cadet formation, grinned and whispered to his neighbor, "Told you they'd figure it out eventually." The Galactic Defense Forces training protocols were revised that very cycle. The section on humanity now included a warning label: low physical durability, extreme tactical adaptability, approach with caution and respect. Colonel Vaxithor made sure of that personally.